97.3 ESPN Flyers beat reporter, and that's Kevin Durso. Kevin, good morning.
Morning, PT.
How you doing, buddy? It's good to catch up with you and talk a little hockey. How's things for you right now on this Saturday morning?
Well, yesterday ended up being a little busier than usual, and normally at this time of the off season you start to get into the dead of it a little bit and wait for everything to come back with the start of training camp and the preseason, but a little bit of news this week with the Flyers, and that's never a bad thing.
Yeah, let's start with that then, I guess. The Scott Laughton 2-year deal, avoid arbitration, right? It's, $2.3 million, so he gets a raise. You know, there's no hearing now. They can avoid that on July 30th, and he is coming off some career numbers. Do you like the deal?
Absolutely. I saw a lot of questions. People are asking why are people so interested in Scott Laughton re-signing. Everybody knows him as the fourth-line guy, but the bottom line is teams don't have success without depth across the entire lineup, and Scott Laughton gives you a great bottom six presence. He's fit the role really well, and I think that one thing about Scott Laughton this upcoming season is that he's probably going to have a chance to play with some better players who fit the fourth line a lot better than some of the guys that he was playing with previously. He still put up career numbers a season ago, had 12 goals, and that's about what you'd want. You know, it's more than you can ask for from a guy who's playing in your bottom six on your fourth line to contribute in that way. And he's a guy who gives you a lot of energy and a lot of hustle every night and brings what he can to the team. Those guys are just as important as guys at the top. You need to have that presence in the bottom six. They fill a specific role. And I think of teams like Boston who, you know, Boston had, in my opinion, the best fourth line in hockey last season. And they lose a player like Noel Acciari who goes to Florida in free agency, and that's a hole you have to fill as a team looking to continue to compete and contend. So you have to have that balance across the lineup, and Scott Laughton being the fourth line center really fills a big spot in this lineup. So absolutely, I'm thrilled with that kind of number for him, and to have him locked up for 2 years, to know what that role is, and to be locked into that spot.
Kevin Durso with us, our Flyers insider for 97.3 ESPN. And you're right, Kevin, on our 97.3ESPN.com website that now there's two names out there that are restricted free agents that Chuck Fletcher has to turn his attention to, and they are big names. They have, $13.4 million left, you said, in cap space. Is that enough to sign those two names, and who are they?
Well, I think the reason that a lot of people we're kind of writing why about Scott Laughton and things like this because it's not one of the names they wanted to hear that is re-signed yet. The two big names that are left are Ivan Provorov and Travis Konecny, and they're two key pieces to your young core moving forward. So I certainly understand why people are anxious about getting them locked up. The bottom line is they're restricted free agents, and this is the first contract negotiation that the Flyers are having with their agents following their entry-level deals. So this is the first real negotiation of it. There's no danger in losing the player per se. At this point in time, it's kind of past the point of offer sheets and things like that. And I don't think there's anything to worry about in Provorov's case as much as people are. Certainly you do get concerned about the number a little bit, whatever he might be asking. But I don't think there's anything to worry about in terms of the weight when you look at other names that are restricted free agents that haven't signed around the league as well. Boston's got to sign Charlie McAvoy. Columbus has to re-sign Zach Werenski. The Rangers traded for Jacob Trouba. They still have to sign him. So the camp from Provorov's side is trying to see what the number is going to be for a defenseman like that because it's going to be comparable. And while you wait for that, there's really nothing that Chuck Fletcher can do other than continue to make contact, continue to be in touch with Provorov's side, and continue to try to work on something. But there might not be a lot of progress in that until you see some of those other names signed. And I think all of those guys are waiting for the other shoe to drop. McAvoy's probably waiting to see what Provorov gets. Provorov's waiting to see what Werenski gets, and so on. So you look at Konecny, though, and I think that that's one that could start to move forward pretty soon now that Laughton's taken care of. And you want to lock up a guy like that, too. You want to see what kind of deal he gets. That's where I think things get a little bit complicated, actually. I don't think there's any secret that Provorov's the type of guy you want to lock up to a long-term deal, and you have to keep your cap space in mind. But Konecny could get either kind of deal. He could get a bridge deal. He could get a long-term deal, and that could play around with what kind of cap space you have. So I do think that the $13.4 million is enough to get it done at this point. You really only have three areas left to address, and that's the two players that we're talking about in Provorov and Konecny. and a third-line winger who at this rate is probably going to be a prospect who comes in out of camp that would be making less than $1 million. So you don't have to worry as much about the cap space from that angle, and you more or less wait for the training camp competition it's going to follow. So I look at those two players and think that $13.4 million, I would have expected probably about $12 million was the maximum that the two would make combined. So I think 13.4 is definitely enough to get the job done and to lock those two players up to whatever kind of deal fits for both sides.
So as far as Provorov and Konechny going, there's a line that I've read out there that says, well, watch out for poachers. Are there people out there that could still come in and sort of blow their socks off and that kind of a deal?
Probably not at this point. Yeah, like I said, I think that if you were going to see anybody try to offer sheet a restricted free agent like that, it would have happened by now.
Okay.
I think the only restricted free agents that have a real chance of getting any type of noise around offer sheets at this point are guys like Mitch Marner and Braden Point and guys who are really at the top that have been to all-star games or are getting recognized league-wide. Not to say that Provorov and Konechny aren't good young players, but I just don't think there's that kind of energy around those players as much as there are around other players. So I think that that's pretty safe at this point. I guess there's people who may be concerned that the Flyers may hit a point in the negotiations where it's just not worth it anymore and they explore a trade. I just don't see that happening either. I don't think Chuck Fletcher has made it any secret that Provorov and Konechny are big pieces to this team's future and that they want to have those guys around. So I don't see anything happening, and I don't think there's any reason to be worried about poachers this late in the offseason.
Kevin, did you think that Provorov took a step back last year? Why were his numbers down last year? 7 goals, minus 16.
Provorov's going to insist otherwise, and he did throughout the year, but I don't think he started the year completely healthy. If you recall, during the Pittsburgh playoff series from the previous season,
right,
he had suffered a separated shoulder. I don't think he was completely healthy at the start of the year. I think that hindered him at the start, and when the team fell so far behind as the earlier months of the season went by, I think there was just really, as great as it was to watch them start to succeed in January into February and have a good run of success. They put together an 8-game winning streak, all of that. I think it was past the point of return from where they were from the earlier months, and it weighs on you. It kind of got to a point where I think in the middle part of the season that I'm talking about, where they finally turned a corner when Carter Hart was up and they were making a little bit of a run, every mistake was magnified at that point because you just couldn't afford one. So I don't think Provorov made many mistakes in the second half. I just think that every single one of them was magnified. The biggest problem that the Flyers had last season was it seemed like every mistake found a way to go into the net. And that's what this offseason has really been all about, is trying to shore up the back end here so that Carter Hart's got some security in front of him and isn't getting peppered like he was, or isn't being forced to make that spectacular save, and can kind of play a more routine game. The first few games that Hart played when he got called up were really sound games where a lot of shots are kept to the outside, and they played a really sound defensive game. And that's what you want to see for 70 out of the 82. You'd like to see it for 82 out of 82, but you'd like to get it on a much more consistent basis. And I think that's been the goal of the offseason, is to make that a more sound defensive group collectively, not just in the 6 defensemen that'll take the ice, but from the forwards as well. And to make it a situation where everybody's numbers look a little bit better, because all of the mistakes were magnified. I think Provorov also got bounced around an awful lot. I mean, his role was always solidified as the top defenseman, but he played with a number of defensive partners.
Right.
There were times he was paired with Shane Gostisbehere, he was paired with Radko Gudas, he was paired with Travis Sanheim sometimes. So they mixed and matched an awful lot last year. So I think that if you can kind of solidify him not only to the role, but give him a playing partner, and I think that's the goal of the veteran defenseman that the Flyers traded for, is to give him a veteran on the other side, not just one of these younger players like Sanheim or Gostisbehere, who may not also be the most defensively sound at their age. I certainly think Sanheim got a lot better, but Gostisbehere it's no secret that he's definitely more of an offensive guy. And it just provides a little bit more security so that this way not every mistake that's made is magnified like that. But I do think health played a factor as well, and I expect that if Provorov finished the year healthy, has a chance to really do what he does in the offseason and train the way that he does, that he should bounce back.
And no matter what, you can't argue the fact that he's durable. He played all 82 games last year at 22 years old and was sixth in the league for time on ice leaders among defensemen last season. He averaged 25.07. Ryan Suter from the Wild, 26.42. Drew Doughty, Chris Letang. I mean, these are established stud defensemen in the NHL, and there's Ivan Provorov at 6. It was Suter, Doughty, Letang, Jones, Yossi, and then Provorov at 6. So his role, obviously, whether he struggled or not, he's out there a lot. Before we move on from defensemen, I do just want to ask, because I haven't talked to you, what your thoughts were on Niskanen and Braun. Braun was maybe a little surprised. Niskanen, some people are sad to see Radko Gudas go. What are your thoughts about those two veteran defensemen coming in?
Well, I do think that there was a little bit head scratching on paper at times to look at these two veterans. They're both guys who need to have a bounce back season. There's no question about it. It kind of explains why their teams were willing to move on from them a little bit at the price that they did. But I do look at the veteran presence and look at the other players on the roster and see an improvement as well. I see the fact that Provorov needs to have a bounce-back year, but maybe needs a guy who doesn't have to jump into the play all the time or can be mobile when he has to be but doesn't have to. That's a guy like Niskanen could fit really well with Provorov and sort of secure the back end and let Provorov be a bit of a hybrid guy where he's able to jump up a little more. I think that was what made Provorov so great 2 seasons ago when he scored 17 goals and had had a tremendous season. He's able to jump into the play a lot more, and you're able to see him really be this offensive-minded player who's mobile and gets into the play a lot more than you think. And I think that he was kind of held back from that last season with the way that everything went on the back end. So maybe that allows him to play his game more naturally. I think the same thing goes for Travis Sanheim. Here's a guy who showcased his offensive ability a lot last season, and now maybe gets a playing partner, whether you put him with Niskanen or Braun. He gets a playing partner who can kind of secure the back end and play the stay-at-home role, and it lets him showcase himself. And I do think that also these two veteran defensemen who both have the ability to play top 4 minutes, it doesn't necessarily mean they're top 4 ability at this point, but they can prove everybody otherwise with a good season. I do think that what this does for Shane Gostisbehere is pretty big too, because it's no secret that Gostisbehere struggles on the defensive side of the game a little bit. And you look at a player like him and you can kind of limit his minutes at even strength. You save him for the power play. You know he's a power play specialist. Maybe that gets his confidence back on the power play, and it gives you a lot more balance. I think the fact that they went out and they targeted right-handed defensemen who are able to play naturally on that right side, opposite of Provorov, Sanheim, Gostisbehere, and there may still be another shoe to fall in this offseason with the number of defensemen they have. They've got Sam Moran and Robert Haig still on the roster too, and to have 8 guys already on the roster, something's going to have to give when training camp hits, because these are all guys who expect to be playing in the NHL next year, and there's going to clearly be no spot available for at least 1, if not 2, pending injuries and performance and everything like that. So I do certainly like what they've tried to do with the veteran presence. I think that can be an improvement. It does remain to be seen, though. It's certainly a risk to look at these players and see what they did a year ago, though, and expect them to just bounce back. So that's the risk of it, but you're hoping the reward outweighs the risk and turns into a worthwhile deal for all sides.
He's our Flyers insider for 97.3 ESPN, Kevin Durso. Find him on Twitter at Kevin_Durso for all Flyers news and information. And Kevin, you know me, I'd love to talk hockey for all 2 hours. Plus, my producer for the show is Hunter Brody. He played hockey, so he could still lace them up with the best of them. I just watched from afar. But, yeah, we've got a very hockey-central theme here on the Pete Thompson Show, so I know we'll have you on again somewhere down the road, bud.
Yeah, absolutely. Always love talking hockey with you guys. No matter what time of year it is, and it definitely gets a little bit slow in these summer months, and the wait can be long, and you can certainly lose patience a little bit trying to wait for September and October to roll around when the team's back on the ice.